Greetings everyone, this is Umby and we're back with week 4 of the VGC Draft League, where this time I'm up against LTrim. Now before we take a look at the match breakdown, I did want to point out I traded in Gyarados for Salamence. The idea there, we're still getting some of the same resistances like fire and water, even pick up a new one with a grass resistance. Not necessarily needed, but it's nice to have there. But there's kind of a problem with Gyarados being such a heavy part of my offense, but not having consistent offensive options. You know, kind of having to use Terra Blast to get its stab move off. With Salamence, I have many more options in the move pool. I'm including something like Aerial Ace or Dual Wing Beat if I need to use it as a stab move, but also it's got a special offensive stat and move pool that it can also use to mix things up, along with some utility as well. It does have Tailwind, and it's gonna be faster than Gyarados to be able to use something like Tailwind. So overall, I think a pretty solid addition to the team. And if we need a water Pokemon, we still have Vaporeon as one of our lower tier slots to help out with that. Now, with that aside, though, I do want to take a look at LTrim's team, and overall, I'm expecting them to bring the match is already concluded, so I expected them to use their first 5 Pokemon there, the Landorus, Iron Hands, Elegant Rotom, and Articuno, just as the most consistent options in their arsenal. From there, things are a little bit flexible. You could use something like the Goodra or the Gothorita. That was the thought I had at the time. But I'm mostly just scared of the Landorus, Iron Hands, and Articuno. So even though I ranked this as like one of the lower teams in the rankings video I did, it does have kind of a unique trinity with the Landorus, Iron Hands, and Articuno as far as the type of offense. So for example, you could pair the Landorus Therian or the Iron Hands with the Articuno. Now those are just 2 really good Pokemon in their own right, hitting really hard on the physical side. Not only does Articuno complement that with damage from the special side of things, but the combination of ground and ice and electric and ice are really hard to defend against. They provide a lot of coverage across the board, and just having all 3 on the same team also just naturally put on pressure onto the opposing teams. On top of that, they're just naturally bulky. Of course, Landorus has the Intimidate to slow everything down, Iron Hands with the huge HP pool and just naturally leaning towards Assault Vest to make it hard to tear through, and even Articuno has some solid defensive stats. That special defense stat just really good, base 125. So yeah, and anything that wants to defend against these Pokemon are pretty much just the Rotoms, and LTrim already has one of them, the Rotom Wash, which does well into the Rotom Ice and the Rotom Fire, both of which will be pretty much the only options to defend against Electric, Ice, and Ground all at the same time. So just removing one of those off the board and fitting well against the others puts it in a pretty good position. So I got my work cut out for me to try and rip through that with my own team. As we know, I've been leaning towards kind of a bulky offense playstyle, but they got the bulk covered a lot better than I do, as well as the overall coverage as well. I can't quite KO things as fast as they can without some very good positioning. So with that in mind, I did kind of come up with a pretty weird team this week. The Heatran and the Rillaboom, just to draw your attention to the right side of the screen, is nothing really new. Leftovers Heatran with Dragon Pulse instead of Flash Cannon, so we can attack the Goodra. Don't really need a Steel type attack for this matchup either way. Rillaboom, Assault Vest, nothing new. Both with very typical Terra types, the Grass on Heatran and the Water on Rillaboom, just to protect it from general ice moves. Freeze Dry is going to be a factor on Articuno, so it still hits the Rillaboom, but just providing some kind of coverage versus ice or fire in general, while not being weak to the ground type moves from Landorus, is going to be helpful. But what I really want to draw your attention to is the Sandy Shocks. You'll notice it's running the Booster Energy, and it's running Timid Nature, so we're going for a booster speed again. Has just enough to get past Scarf Landorus, because if they're going Scarf, that's where I expect it to come from. But we're going with a bulky moveset with double screens, like screen and reflect. Now we're going with a neutral attack here with try attack. I'm going to be hitting the hardest, but if we're going for a single move, it's going to be tough to pick between Earth Power and Thunderbolt. Kind of damned if I do, damned if I don't with in either situation, just because our team fends against it so well. Like, you got the Landorus, immune to both moves. The Iron Hands fends off the Thunderbolt, even though it's weak to the Earth Power. But then Articuno is immune to Earth Power, even though it's weak against the Thunderbolt. So rather than kind of feel that out, I just decided to go for a neutral attack, try attack. It's the one with the most utility as well, because I can potentially get a status effect off while I'm targeting things down. We're not expecting this to do a lot of damage either way, since we went for this bulky move set. The idea is to pair that with something like the Heatran and Rillaboom, who are naturally bulky, but also the Iron Thorns and Gardevoir, which I've also built pretty bulky as well. So a little bit of inspiration from this past weekend with Worlds 23, where one of the players had used from Japan Terra Fairy Cresselia along with a Grimmsnarl. Light Screen, Reflect, Parting Shot, just to completely shut out teams from getting any kind of one-hit KO or even two-hit KOs there. I'm kind of translating that over into this style of team, where you can even see the Gardevoir. Not a lot of offense put into it, but a ton of bulk, going to the bold nature near max defense with a Calm Mind moveset. And then the Iron Thorns, just naturally bulky. Behind the screens, well, they're both going to be poised to just gradually get there. Like, Gardevoir will stack up Calm Minds, be hard to tear through itself, and doing pretty neutral damage across the board. It'll land 1 to 2 hit KOs on everything most expected. Going with Psychic and Mystical Fire just to get some general coverage. Psychic plus Fire is pretty good coverage across the board. Moonblast, I was just worried that I might run into a Steel type and get stuck there, especially since I'm not running any ground moves anywhere. And Heatran, who I really didn't want to bring to the matchup just in general, is the only source outside of that of fire damage to hit the Steel type. So pretty cool combination there. And then the Iron Thorns with Clear Amulet to fend off the Landorus, the Intimidate from that. Going with Terra Fairy. Again, drawing inspiration from that Terra Fairy Cresselia from this past Worlds, and just going for full coverage across the board. Ice Punch, Rock Slide, Wild Charge, just to make sure I get maximum coverage, and then Terra Blast, so that I have something to target down the Iron Hands fighting typing with. Last but not least, we've got our debut for the Salamence, just running a Life Orb set with Draco Meteor Heat Wave. Again, solid coverage from Dragon and Fire, just naturally, but also going to be able to get around the Landorus having Intimidate, so not worried about any attack drops there. We also get some spread damage through additional Heat Wave. Again, so I didn't really want to bring Heatran to the matchup, just because that Landorus and the combination of Landorus and Articuno really makes it hard for it to operate. You really want to go something like Terra Grass to fend off against like Stomping Tantrum, but then that leaves you vulnerable to the attacks from the Articuno. But here with Salamence, we've got Terra Fire, and just naturally being faster than the Landorus, I'm allowed to get my damage off much easier than the Heatran can, because I'm naturally moving faster than the Landorus. But if push comes to shove, I also have the Tailwind to help speed up the rest of the team and get into position. Alright, so that was a mouthful, but let's go ahead and show you how the matches went. Okay, so game number 1. And just as I said, as expected, we did see 5 of the expected Pokemon just from the high end of LTrim's draft here. And the Gudra slot, which I think is a little bit flexible there. That one can be just generally good defensive coverage for the Rillaboom and Heatran, whose natural stab won't really affect it too much, but we do have safeguards against that, so I'm feeling pretty comfortable with that matchup. Also, normally I go for a slow speed, but these matches are a little bit longer than usual because we're really trying to feel these turns out. So I'm going to leave on normal speed and try and keep up, leading with the Articuno Iron Hands from LTrim side, where I go and test out my Sandy Shocks plus a Gardevoir combination. I'm going to go ahead with the double protect so we can scout out this fake out here whereas the Articuno shows the Icy Wind. Now that's a little bit trouble for Sandy Shocks there, because I'm not planning on using Terra for anytime soon. Plus, it negates the booster energy speed I'm not going to get back anytime soon. Now they show the next turn Swords Dance and Iron Hands, which is pretty scary. So I'm gonna go for a protect while I set up the second screen with the Sandy Shocks and protect with the Gardevoir. Just even with the Reflect, I'm not confident it can take that hit from +2 Wild Charge. I get my Rillaboom plan to fake out and use a Psychic to double up and knock out the Iron Hands, but they switch into Landorus, get another Icy Wind off, and Landorus takes over half of its health in recompense there. Articuno, another Icy Wind, content to do that, gets a critical hit, unfortunate, onto the Rillaboom, but we stay alive. Landorus with a U-turn, activated my Citrus Berry, which is pretty good for me, and I'm also allowed to U-turn and reposition. All I've got left is the Salamence, though. That's going to lower the attack stat on the Iron Hands. Meanwhile, I finally show Mystical Fire on the Gardevoir to put some damage onto the Articuno, possibly in range for a second hit KO there. They're going to be safe though. Switch to the Landorus, probably expecting to drop the Salamence's attack before it can do anything drastic like a Rock Slide. But the Iron Hands though also gets a fake out, so we're just going to double protect for safety as well. They retreat in favor of Lilligant. I get to set up a Tailwind. Landorus gets to Rock Slide, gets the spread damage, but nothing too serious. Meanwhile, Lilligant takes all of its life shows Sash, thanks to that Psychic hitting it on the way in. And I get to use Heat Wave. Go for Terra Fire just to maximize damage and make sure that I can take out that Landorus, as I need to get this Pokemon advantage here. We're at a 4v2 now as Articuno and Iron Hands showing up again. Articuno showing that it does have the Terra Water there. I want to go on the offensive here, just afraid of that Swords Dance showing back up and ruining my day. But the Articuno content to Icy Wind along with the Iron Hands, definitely going for the fake out there. We still have Tailwind up, so we're still at speed advantage, and I get to use Draco Meteor to finish off the Articuno. Iron Hands cleans up with the Drain Punch into the Salamence here. Feeling pretty good about this one because I can fake out the Iron Hands and knock it out with the Psychic, but I learned the hard way that it's carrying Covert Cloak, so no flinch, and that leaves Rillaboom at too low of health to really deal with the Iron Hands here, and the Drum Beating just not enough to KO it, while the Iron Hands gets to clean up again with the Drain Punch, just hanging on barely there. So we go into game 2, and I take a little while to make some adjustments and figure out my lead here. But LTrim's going to go with Iron Hands and Goodra. Meanwhile, I'm going to go with the other side of my strategy. Sandy Shocks, Iron Thorns, immediately Terra Fairy. I'm going to start targeting down this Iron Hands as quick as possible and get these screens up. They go for a fake out into the Sandy Shocks, which allows me to freely get some damage into the Iron Hands. They show off Acid Armor on the Goodra. So at this point, I'm not too worried. Just by virtue of them showing the body press, they don't have anything from the Goodra to touch the Iron Thorns, which allows me to focus my efforts into the other slot. Not really worrying about too much here. Even there, they show that their second attack is Dragon Claw. It's not going to be able to touch the Terra Fairy Thorns. Most certainly wasn't expecting that there. So we're just going to get some damage down into the Rotom, follow up with an attack. We were hoping they would stay in so we can finish up with a Wild Charge, but Iron Hand shows up instead, takes it pretty handily, gets a fake out for its troubles. And I get some damage with the Tri-Attack, not enough to knock it out, but it's probably the best scenario because I get to Tri-Attack and get a Terra Blast into the Goodra for a hefty chunk of damage in the same turn, which sets up better for the following turns there. Sandy Shocks being so bulky makes it hard for the Goodra to take down there, so it just gives me a lot of breathing room. Here I decide I want to reserve the Sandy Shocks as the light screen is coming up, so I protect, get some more damage down to the Goodra, but I'm put down pretty low from that Hydro Pump nonetheless. So I switch into the Salamence. With the light screen, it takes it up the Volt Switch pretty well from the Rotom here. They go into the Articuno, but I'm still at a pretty good advantage. Want to scout out what this Articuno is doing because I haven't gotten a feel for when they want to Terra here. So I go for a double protect. I figure I'm pretty safe this turn if I just go for the Heatran. They have to show something like Terra Water, again with Terra Blast to take out the Heatran. So I feel pretty safe behind this light screen. But they go for Terra Grass on this Rotom next here. Coming in, so I double protect as I'm trying again to scout out when they want to Terra. I'm expecting on the Articuno there. But with the Terra Grass on the Rotom, I'm pretty free to just Heat Wave here. Figure with the light screen, I take the Hydro Pump on the Heatran, and I do so accordingly, land the Heat Wave, knock out the Rotom, and put Articuno on life support. Sandy Shocks has been doing a ton of work for this game too, while my other slot gets to attack and switch pretty freely. as we knock out the Articuno and go into game number 3. And with these adjustments, LTrim's going with Landorus and Lilligant this time. I opt for Salamence and Sandy Shocks, still relying on those reflects and light screens getting up, and with this lead I'm able to get one up freely, no threat of fake out this time. So reflect goes up, tailwind goes up, not too worried about the Landorus, who shows that it has the clear amulet. I've been wondering what item it had been running this entire time. Figure is going to go for another rock slide, and then we also get an icy wind, so I can freely switch in the Heatran here, and if needed I don't mind using Terra Grass once I have the light screen in play. But they're going to retreat the Articuno in favor of the Iron Hands, still trying to scout out what the Landorus wants to do, perhaps the Stomping Tantrum. So I just leave it protected there, not too worried. Going to protect in the following turn, expecting the fake out into that slot while I get off a Heat Wave. I'm still pretty confident with the Reflect up. Heatran's able to take on the Drain Punch just fine. Articuno goes for a Freeze Dry, not catching any kind of Terra here. Not willing to reveal that just yet. Meanwhile, Tri Attack from the Sandy Shocks finally showing its value, gets a burn onto the Landorus. Follow up with a Heat Wave, Landorus is taken pretty low, and with the Iron Hands using Drain Punch on my Heatran, which is the Reflect up, it takes it pretty well. So I'm pretty glad for that. We're going to reduce Iron Hands' efforts even further by switching in the Salamence, getting the Intimidate off, and now it's doing even less damage. Landorus, even though it has that clear amulet, is burned, is still not really doing too much for me to really worry about here. So I'm just going to focus down everything around the Landorus. I go for the Tri Attack, get the Tailwind back up. So we're still trying to set up the Heatran in the back, and also have Iron Thorns in the back as well. Again, another focus into the area around Landorus, another Tri Attack as the Lilligant comes in, and a Heat Wave lands to finish it off. Back down to the ones that led all this off, the Iron Hands and the Articuno. Iron Hands going to use Terra Flying here. Go for another fake out. But I'm just going to go ahead and use Protect. Don't mind if the Sandy Shocks goes down, because it gives me a free switch into this Iron Thorn, so we've been saving the Terra Fairy this entire time. So we go for a Heat Wave and a Rock Slide, just to cover all bases and finish off the game. And we finally got a major dub in usage for the Iron Thorns that we hyped up at the beginning of the season, and a really fun set of matches. So good games, well played to LTrim. Legitimately, that was a pretty fun set. Last but not least, my opponent was kind enough to leave their team sheet with me, and there's nothing overall too crazy going on. Like the Iron Hands with the Covert Cloak was like the kind of the star of the show. That was pretty cool. They took notice that I had 2 Pokemon that were faster, of course, than the Iron Hands with the ability to use Fake Out. They figured if I decided to use those, I would generally use them towards the Iron Hands to stop it from faking out in turn, and the Covert Cloak would just negate that. It definitely did catch me off guard in game number 1, kind of saving the game for it, because otherwise I was in position to just snatch the game away with the Gardevoir. The Swords Dance was also something just really scary to think about and deal with. Unfortunately, didn't get a chance to show its merit. They might be able to get away with it in one of the earlier turns of game 1, but it looks like they wanted to preserve the fact that it had Covert Cloak until later on in the game, just to kind of keep me off guard and try and get advantages elsewhere. The bulk up on Landorus, I don't really agree with. I don't think you get as much room to really set that up, because we even saw from some of the play that Iron Hands only tried to Swords Dance one time, and then the rest of the time it was trying to just get damage down where it could. Same thing kind of happened with the Landorus. Like even when it was burned, there was pressure for it to just go ahead and toss out an attack, expecting me to KO it at any point. But at a certain point, you would have had to have chosen to bulk up to at least try and negate the burn damage, to then do significant damage, if that's what you wanted to use. But other than that, you might have to go with just something like Terra Flying, Terra Blast, in order to do like some neutral damage across the board. Lilligant, Focus Sash, no, nothing out of the ordinary either. Again, with the stat boosting moves, Victory Dance, a little bit greedy without the support to really set it up and let it pop off. I honestly think if there was something like Sleep Powder there, that would have put me in a couple of disadvantageous situations, especially since I wasn't using a lot of Terra Grass. Is really just on Heatran, which you could cover with both Close Combat and an Ice Spinner. I think Ice Spinner is just a better choice overall than the Acrobatics, because you also get to hit my Rillaboom effectively and take away the grassy terrain. On top of that, the Goodra that you have set up here with the Grassy Seed and the Sap Sipper makes it so that I don't want to really use the Rillaboom, so you're also free to Sleep Powder, because now that grass typing, the natural grass typing, is not a factor either. Articuno with Choice Specs, it's pretty interesting. I think it kind of jammed you up because you couldn't switch between Terra Blast Water and Freeze Dry, whatever you targeted my Heatran with. But I get it. Articuno's base special attack is not super amazing, so having the extra boost from the Choice Specs, I get it, makes sense. And when we, like I mentioned before, we were talking about the Landorus and the Iron Hands in combination with the Articuno makes for this really cool offensive pressure, so that Choice Specs kind of adds onto it, especially if you want to go Icy Wind for a spread move. Also, lowering speed will help the Landorus and the Iron Hands in the long run. And then last but not least, Rotom Wash, very typical, can't hate that. Was Hydro Pump, Volt Switch. Unfortunate that was had to rely on Volt Switch, which kind of mitigated the kind of damage that you could do, but even through screens, it was doing respectable damage with the Volt Switch. Might have just been due to my own EVs, not sure, but it was packing quite a punch regardless of the mitigation I was doing. So yeah, nothing too heavy that I would disagree with outside of again, just the choice of the stat boosting moves. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. Well played. Good luck in the next rounds, because I still think, even though I don't rate the team highly overall, it still has some things there that makes it a very threatening squad that you've put together. Either way, that's all from me for now. If you do like this content, I always appreciate a like and a comment below, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.